The Rosetta Stone, Unlocking Egyptian Secrets. Part 1. A rock that changed reading forever. Hey, welcome back. Quick thought experiment. Imagine trying to read a language that's been silent for nearly 2,000 years. No living speakers. No dictionary. No grammar books. Just symbols carved into stone, beautiful, mysterious, and totally mute. That was ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, until one very scratched, broken slab of rock changed everything. Today we're telling the story of the Rosetta Stone, how it was found, what's written on it, and why it became the key that unlocked a civilization. We're going to go slow, keep it human, and talk about the real people who stared at symbols until they finally talked back. Alright, let's set the scene. A Napoleon, a fort, and a surprise in the dust. It's 1799. Napoleon's campaign is in Egypt. Whatever you think of the politics, the expedition brings along scholars, artists, mapmakers, basically, a portable research institute. Near the town of Rashid, Rosetta, French engineers are repairing an old Ottoman fort when a soldier spots a weird slab in the rubble, dark basalt, broken at the top and sides, covered with 3 blocks of text. One looks like a string of tiny ants, that's Greek. The middle looks like a flowing script, Demotic, the everyday Egyptian writing of the time, and the top is those iconic picture signs, hieroglyphs. Somebody realizes this might be important. The slab gets hauled to Cairo. Plaster casts are made. Copies are sent to Europe. Then history does what history does, empires collide. The French lose control, the British take the stone as part of the spoils. By 1802, it's in the British Museum, where it still sits behind glass while millions of visitors press their faces close and whisper, "That's the one." What exactly is it? The Rosetta Stone is basically an official notice, a decree issued in 196 BCE by a council of priests honoring Ptolemy VI. Think of it as a government press release carved into stone. The cool part is not the content, it's the format. The same decree is carved 3 times, in hieroglyphs, for temple use, in Demotic, for everyday administration, and in Greek, the language of the Ptolemaic rulers. 3 versions of the same text. Boom! That's your bilingual, well, trilingual, decoder ring problem. The top, hieroglyphic, section is broken, so it's incomplete. But the Greek? Crystal clear. And scholars in Europe could read Greek.so. Now the race begins. If Greek says X and Demotic says X in Egyptian, and hieroglyphs also say X, maybe, just maybe, we can map unknown symbols to known sounds and words. Sounds obvious in 2025. In 1800? Total gamble. Why did the language go silent? Fast rewind. For more than 3,000 years, Egyptians wrote with multiple scripts. Hieroglyphs were formal, sacred, and highly visual. Hieratic was a cursive version used by priests. Demotic was even more simplified, fast, practical writing for letters, taxes, contracts. Over time, when Egypt Christianized, a new script called Coptic, Greek letters with a few Demotic signs, became the language of churches and books. Hieroglyphs fell out of daily use and, by late antiquity, stopped being taught. If no one teaches a writing system, it dies. People kept seeing the bird and reed carvings on temple walls, but no one could read them. By the Renaissance, Europeans assumed hieroglyphs were basically mystical pictures, not a true script. They thought each symbol was like an allegory rather than a sound or a word. Pretty, yes. Legible, no. One stone was about to call their bluff. The cast copies and the copper-stained letters. I love this part. Before the stone even reached London, casts and inked impressions were circulating. Imagine receiving an envelope in, say, 1800 with an ink rubbing of these bizarre lines. Coffee on the seal, wax smudges, someone's marginal notes. Could this be a name? Scholars in Paris, London, Rome pass them around like bootleg mixtapes. That sharing, primitive open access, matters. It's how a puzzle gets solved. The Rosetta Stone becomes a kind of intellectual arm wrestling match spread across Europe. Everyone agrees, Greek is the anchor. But what is Demotic? Is it alphabetic? Syllabic? Ideographic? Same for hieroglyphs. Are they pictures of ideas, or can they represent sounds like alphabet letters? At first, most people bet on pictures of ideas. The idea that the little l might be an actual sound, like M, just feels wrong to them. Too modern. Too simple. Too unromantic. Spoiler, the owl is an M. But it takes years of stubbornness to prove it. Why this stone became the key. Think of decipherment like cracking a safe. If all you have is one dial with random clicks, good luck. But if you have two dials that you know are saying the same numbers, that gives you leverage. The Rosetta Stone is leverage. The Greek tells you what the decree says in content, names, dates, titles. Demotic and hieroglyphs have to match that content, even if they phrase it differently. The smartest move. Find something that travels easily across languages, proper names. Ptolemy. Cleopatra. Alexandros. Names are gold because languages tend to transcribe them, not translate them. If you can spot Ptolemaios in Greek, maybe you can spot a matching cluster in Demotic, and then again in hieroglyphs. Do that a few times and you start building a sound map. That, right there, is going to be our part 2. The people who chased those names. The visual trick that hid the sounds in plain sight. And the moment someone said, "I've got it," and almost collapsed from the rush, hold that thought. Because from here on, every bird, snake, and folded cloth on temple walls is going to start speaking. Part 2. The race to read names, scripts, and the stubborn genius is okay. We've got our trilingual stone and a world full of excited scholars. Now meet the players and the plays. First movers, de Sacy and Accablad. In the early 1800s, Sylvestre de Sacy, a French giant in Oriental languages, starts poking at the Demotic text. He suspects Demotic is phonetic at least some of the time, i.e., it records sounds, not just ideas. He uses the Greek section as a guide to hunt for the names of officials and gods. He makes progress but stops short of a total breakthrough. Enter Johann David Accablad, a Swedish diplomat with a knack for scripts. He tries to map portions of Demotic as an alphabet, especially for foreign names. His alphabet isn't perfect, but it's closer than people realize. He senses the door, but the handle's still slippery. Thomas Young, the physicist who moonlighted as a code breaker. Then you get the ultimate generalist, Thomas Young. This is the guy who figured out light's wave nature and the concept of elasticity that engineers still use. On weekends, because apparently being a world-class physicist wasn't enough, he studies the Rosetta Stone. Young notices something famous. In the hieroglyphic section, certain groups of signs are carved inside ovals. He calls these ovals cartouches. He guesses correctly that cartouches ring-fence royal names. If you can crack a cartouche, you can anchor sounds. Young compares cartouches with the Greek names in the decree. One candidate stands out, Ptolemaios, Ptolemy. He tries mapping signs to letters and gets a partial success. He suggests that some hieroglyphs are phonetic when used in names, especially foreign, Greek names, while elsewhere they might be symbolic. It's not the whole truth, but it's a huge step. Champollion, the kid who never let go, and then there's Jean-François Champollion, a prodigy who taught himself languages for breakfast. He grows up obsessed with Coptic, the Christian language of Egypt that preserves late-stage Egyptian words with Greek letters. Champollion's big hunch: Coptic is Egyptian, not unrelated, not exotic, but the last phase of the same tongue once written in hieroglyphs. If that's right, Coptic can become the dictionary to decode earlier scripts. He studies everything: copies of inscriptions, papyri, Akablad's alphabet, Young's cartouches, Coptic grammar. He's poor, frequently ill, and constantly told the problem is impossible. He keeps going anyway. You know that stare you get when you've been looking at a puzzle too long? That's Champollion for years, the double strike, names, and then words. Champollion follows Young's cartouche strategy but pushes harder. He looks not only for Ptolemy but also Cleopatra on other monuments. Cleopatra conveniently shares some sounds with Ptolemy, P, L, O, etc., and has letters with clear shapes in Greek. He assigns probable values to repeating hieroglyphs in the cartouches. The sounds start to stick, then comes the moment. He realizes the system isn't a straight alphabet like English. Hieroglyphs can act in three ways: phonograms, signs for sounds, consonants, mostly, logograms, signs for whole words, like a picture of a house meaning house, determinatives, silent classifiers placed at the end of a word to show its category: tiny seated man equals a person's name, wavy lines equals water, etc. This is the breakthrough mindset. A script can be hybrid, part sound, part symbol, part hint. Once you accept that, the walls fall. There's a famous story about September 1822. Champollion matches a set of signs to the Coptic word for sun and realizes the phonetic value fits across examples. He reportedly runs into his brother's office, yells "Jet's l'affaire! I've got it!" and faints. Whether he literally fainted or not, the vibe is right. After centuries of silence, the door just opened. Young versus Champollion, and why both matter. There's been a long, sometimes heated debate over credit. Young published earlier notes on phonetic values and cartouches. Champollion produced the first coherent system that actually read sentences. The same answer? Both were crucial. Young proved phonetics had a legitimate place. Champollion proved phonetics was the backbone, not only for foreign names but for Egyptian words too, with logograms and determinatives riding shotgun from here. Champollion writes letters, gives lectures, publishes a précis, a manual of how the script works. More inscriptions yield. Grammar takes shape. Other scholars jump in. A language is waking up. Why the cartouche trick is genius. Let's demystify that trick for your viewers. Imagine the Greek text says the priests honor Ptolemaios, Lord of Kings. Now scan the hieroglyphs for an oval, a cartouche. Inside you spot, say, 7 signs. If you see the same group again in similar places, say, the Temple of Oval, or the Reign of Oval, you suspect the oval is the king's name. Now you either find a second cartouche on another monument labeled in Greek as Cleopatra, or you use statistical overlap. If the fourth symbol in Ptolemy's name is the same as the third symbol in Cleopatra's, maybe that's the shared letter L. Do this across several names and the mapping grows. That's not magic, it's pattern matching. Once some sounds are secure, you try them on common words: sun, God, king, year, great. If the readings produce sensible Coptic-like words, congratulations, you're reading, not guessing. By the mid-1820s, that's where we are, reading. Not every sign, not every nuance, but enough to move from names to sentences. Part 3. How hieroglyphs actually work. All right, the mechanics. Let's make this super clear and super friendly, like you're explaining it to a smart friend over coffee. Point 3 Jobs, 1 script. Hieroglyphs are flexible. A single sign can be used in multiple ways depending on context. Phonograms, symbols used for sounds. Most represent one consonant, think of them like consonant letters, some represent 2 or 3. Vowels aren't usually written explicitly, Egyptian readers supplied them from context, like Arabic and Hebrew often do. Logograms, symbols used as whole words. A picture of a house can literally mean house. Often a small vertical stroke is added after a logogram to say, I'm being used as a whole word here. Determinatives, silent classifiers at the end of a word. They don't get pronounced. They just tell you what kind of thing the word is: a person, a place, a god, an abstract idea, something that burns, something that flows. Think of them as emoji that disambiguate. This mix sounds messy, it's actually elegant. It lets the script be compact and precise in a world with no spaces or punctuation. Reading direction, hieroglyphs can face left or right. You read toward the faces. If the birds look left, you read leftward. Lines can be horizontal or vertical. On the Rosetta, it's horizontal, all facing the same way. Nice and tidy example you can narrate. Ptolemy, pull up an image in editing and guide the audience. In Greek, Ptolemaios. In the hieroglyphic cartouche, Champollion identified signs mapping roughly to Ptolmys. Remember, vowels are tricky. O is often represented via a consonant sign plus context. The rectangle with cross sign often gives a P-T value in this context. There are debates over exact values in Ptolemaic spelling. The lion can represent L, the reed can be a voweled consonant marker, the owl is M, this one's very famous, the double reed or other signs support the rest. The point isn't to make your viewers memorize, it's to show, look, repeated shapes equals repeated sounds. Cartouches are sound buckets, another crowd pleaser. Cleopatra works beautifully because of shared letters with Ptolemy. Cleopatra, Greek, shares L, P, T, R. If you see the lion, L, in both, bingo. Now it's not just guesswork, you're building a system from names to words. Once phonetics are in play, you can try a common title like NSW Baiti, often translated King of Upper and Lower Egypt. Signs cluster, determinatives help, the Sej and B combos for the two lands. You can also show, so Ra, son of Ra, a royal formula. Suddenly the royal titulary isn't decoration, it's readable. Determinatives equals cheat code. Say the sign spells something like PR. That could be upper, par, PR. But then a little house determinative sits at the end. PR with a house? That means house. The determinative narrows the options like a context clue. Same with the seated man determinative, people's names, professions, titles. A scroll determinative, abstract ideas or words written down. A city sign, place names. Your brain starts to anticipate categories, which makes reading faster. Are they pictures or sounds? Both. Here's the line that helps your audience: hieroglyphs are pictures that can behave like letters. That's the brilliance. They carry meaning and sound, and writers use that toolbox flexibly. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Grammar in a nutshell. We won't do a full grammar class, but a couple of friendly notes help. Egyptian is mostly root plus pattern. Like Semitic languages, word order is often verb subject object. Does the king the thing? Suffix pronouns attached to words, like his house equals house his. Determinatives do a lot of heavy lifting for clarity. Knowing this isn't required to love the script, but it explains why some translations sound a little out of order to English. Is why Coptic mattered so much. Champollion's secret sauce was Coptic. Because it's Egyptian written with Greek letters, plus a few extra signs, it preserved Egyptian vocabulary. When a hieroglyphic word looked like it should sound Ra for sun, and Coptic had Ra for the same concept, ding. That convergence gave Champollion confidence. Coptic wasn't a random cousin, it was family. By the 1830s, scholars could read inscriptions, not just names. The mute walls of temples, Karnak, Luxor, Philly, started talking. And they had a lot to say. Part 4. Consequences. Egypt speaks again. So what happens after you wake a language from a 2-millennia nap? Short answer. An entire field is born. Egyptology goes from art to archive. Before the Rosetta breakthrough, Egypt was mostly pictures, colossal statues, pretty columns, mysterious tombs. After? Temples become libraries. Now you can read king lists, rituals, building inscriptions saying, Pharaoh X built this hall or restored that shrine. You learn how Egyptians talked about gods, kingship, time, festivals. You hear everyday voices in letters, contracts, and graffiti. We move from wow, that's big to oh, that says this. The human stuff returns. My favorite outcome isn't the king lists, it's the people. Once Demotic and hieratic texts open up, you meet scribes complaining about rations, families arguing over inheritances, apprentices learning trades, a worker writing his sweetheart. Suddenly the civilization isn't stone and gold, it's human again. Correcting myths. Decipherment kills bad myths. We stop thinking pyramids were coded prophecies or temples were magical manuals. We learn the actual stories Egyptians told about creation, the afterlife, the journeys of Ra, the trials of Osiris. We learn how festivals synced with flood cycles and lunar months. We meet Hatshepsut, Akhenaten, Ramses II, not as vague legends but as rulers with policies, egos, and timelines. The Rosetta ripple effect. The success on the Rosetta Stone fuels confidence for other dead scripts. Scholars attack cuneiform, Linear B, Mayan glyphs, each with its own drama. It becomes okay to believe that patient pattern hunting plus the right anchors can resurrect voices. The Rosetta becomes a metaphor for any big unlock, the Rosetta Stone of X. Whose stone is it? We should also acknowledge the modern conversation. The stone was discovered by the French in Egypt, taken by the British after the French surrender, and has sat in London ever since. Today, Egypt has world-class museums and requests for repatriation have grown stronger. This debate isn't just about one object, it's about heritage, access, and history. Wherever you land on it, including this context makes the story honest and current. The real magic trick. In the end, the Rosetta Stone isn't magical because of the decree itself, it's pretty routine, a political thank you to a king. It's magical because it forced 3 scripts to stand side by side and admit they said the same thing. That parallel let humans do what we're weirdly good at: compare, notice, hypothesize, test, revise. It's a win for curiosity and stubbornness. Close it like a human. So here's your takeaway. One stone didn't just translate a few lines, it reconnected us with 3,000 years of memory. It taught us that pictures can be letters, that silence can be temporary, and that patient minds can turn a rock into a library card. If you could read one wall in Egypt today, any wall, what would it be? A tomb biography? A temple hymn? A love poem scratched on plaster by a scribe who was supposed to be working? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear which voice you'd bring back first. And hey, if this journey through symbols lit something up for you, hit like, tap subscribe, and share this with that one friend who hoards fun facts. Next time, we're opening another ancient door.